regulation, those kind of things. Do you have any viewpoints on that?
Well, I think in some ways, if only there were so few that they could fall. Because I mean, I find that exchanges are, increasingly in people's definition of an exchange is quite loose. I mean, I find there are new ones coming all the time, and people are looking for funding to start exchanges. I mean, I was with London Derivatives Exchange this afternoon. So LDX is relatively small, relatively new entrant. So I hear what you're talking about, very large, people, big traders of Bitcoin and things like that. Sure, I mean, there will be naturally forming, quite a tight cabal or quite an oligopoly. But that's to be expected in that kind of competition. I think really where the exchanges will prove themselves very effective is when they're able to do business on a very bespoke way with people and raise them their money. So they will effectively become like investment banks. They'll become an agent for raising money for business expansion.
Like the IEO platforms?
Well, like the IEO platform, absolutely. But I mean, of course, everything redefines itself on an almost daily basis. But that's really what I was alluding to when I was talking about the STOs. And I think that IEO platform, I find it, a little bit, I think it has more meaning than simply to say, well, isn't an IEO just an ICO that doesn't have a bad name? I mean, I'd say that it's really that's what people should be doing. There's no point sitting around saying, well, we've got a whole load of names that are listed on our exchange and we're trying to trade those names. The real value add is the raising of the new money.
Yeah, well, this is what I mean. I'm sorry to labour the point, but an IEO is essentially an ICO where you go to a platform where you trust the operator, right? Where you trust the exchange, but at the same time, you've got all this, let's say, shadowy activity in the background that some of these exchanges partake in, collusion, those kind of details. Trust is a big thing in this industry, right? And I just want to get your viewpoint on that.
Yeah, well, I think that's at the essence of how things have always been in terms of raising money for people. That if you're going to invest in an idea, that you've got to have a trust. The person who's not only the person who's got the idea, but the person who's facilitating that idea. I mean, when I was a very sort of young kid and I was coming into working in finance for the first time, I remember that the motto of the London Stock Exchange was "Dictum Meum Pactum," and there was a huge belief in the whole London finance industry that if your word was your bond, that was it, and that people that was and that's part of the reason that New York, London, Singapore have been so successful as financial centres, because they have that very high level of inherent trustworthiness in their own ecosystem. But I think you are looking at quite a lot of new organisations being formed. They're very early stage. I think you have to make sure that people are very open about fees, open about the ability to place deals, open about their regulatory structure. So I think it's definitely there. You have to do a little bit of due diligence on your exchange when you're going into that process. But it's all learning by doing, because we're talking about stuff that's happening here that's very new, but it's likely to be very relevant as things are coming towards us. I mean, we've got big influences out there which are going to be very different from the stuff that we've been used to handling. I mean, whether it's quantum computers, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's blockchain, I mean, they're all coming at us at a reasonable amount of speed, and we've got to be able to adapt to that. Some things will never change, and like I said, the thing that will never change is that the success of what we do will always be about our ability to raise finance to finance the growth of the economy. I mean, I don't know most of us probably read the FCA Bank of England Treasury book, the handbook for crypto assets, but they made it very clear they wanted London to be a dynamic financial centre, and that they believe that the success of what's going on in this space is its ability to finance business expansion. And if that is successful, then as I say, we in this room are all part of that success, and we should be justifiably rewarded for being, for our contribution.
And does your business have an exchange, or do you have relationships with exchanges?
No, we're really service providers. I mean, Blockchain Analytica is the brand we want to run with. I'm sorry, some guys are trying to look us up on the internet, but there is, if you do go in there, blockchainanalytica.io, you will find the website. But given that most of it's been done by me, you'll find there's not very much that's been done. What we want to do, as I say, is provide those services and limit ourselves to those. Because, I mean, we know people in exchanges, we know people who do token economics, we know people who provide roadshow services and things like that. So what we can do in-house really is research, corporate advisory, and then just work on that long-running grind of fundraising.
Mm-hmm.
One question about liquidity, obviously, the make or break for any exchange. My company, we're looking this year into raising potentially a security token, but what we found was that really there is no liquidity whatsoever on the platforms we're looking at.
Yeah, I think that's an inherent problem associated with anywhere where you are at early stage or where you're in the smaller market cap space. I mean, you've got some very long-standing situations in fiat, where you've got like bonds where you haven't got much market cap, you've got equities which don't have much market cap, you've got people trying to trade these things in the traditional match bargain way, so you do run into liquidity problems. I mean, ideally, what we want to be able to see is more success stories where people are investing heavily in early stage situations where the practice of the industry has been established, or the best practice of the industry has been established, and as a result of that, we end up with more liquidity.
You mentioned that the core focus of blockchain analytics was very much raising the capital to support the business. Would they support the business, let's say, with the growth strategy, or helping to grow the business and taking them through the different phases of corporate development?
Well, that's part of what we'd say is corporate advisory. I mean, I do spend time telling other people how I think they should run their businesses, but I've never managed to become very popular in the process. But I think I think where I would always say to a company about their strategy is we can help them with the market strategy. We can't help them with cost and management strategy, and we can't help them with market growth. So once we've established proof of concept, total addressable market, had a look under the hood of a business, talked about the senior management and done some dynamic financial modelling, really where they end up is only where I see things which I feel that the market or the end investor would feel very uncomfortable with. I might say to them, so long as you run with this structure, or so long as you own that business and that business simultaneously, you're never going to get a fair value for your asset. And again, I would always say the other thing is about investment message. I mean, when you've got investors buying into product because they're expecting, or buying into a financial instrument because they're expecting to get a good message, the message has to be good. And if the message is bad, you've got to tell the people, your message is not good. And so I feel the message when I said to Brian Basham, we should set this thing up, and these are the things that we should do. I mean, that conversation lasted 5 minutes because it was very clear. We know, we're doing some of these services under another brand name. We need to roll it into a different one. We know what the services people want are, and we can just get on and do it. And then it's really up to that. It's a question of just selling and starting to accumulate. But
you were talking before about revenue share token.
Yeah.
Do you think this will increase or decrease opacity in financials and the companies? So do you think those are more likely to be used by companies with opaque financials number, or the opposite?
Well, I think with the revenue share token, the advantage of that is that it's very clear, so it's the opposite. Because I feel that you know what you're getting, that you know that when a company, if it doubles its revenue, that the value of the payment to that token will double. So therefore, I feel you've got great clarity, and you're not subjected to a policy, or you're not subjected to any other issues to do with that company. If they're generating the revenue, they are mandated to pay a portion of that revenue to those token holders. So I think there's great clarity in the space.
I think though there is less, they are not forced, as in traditional equity markets, to reveal what the revenue they have, for example.
Well, they haven't got the same reporting rules as you would have if you had a listing company, which is really trying to establish the dividend-paying capability of that company through its accounts. But I think with a revenue share token, and we're getting do a lot of learning in this process and see how it's working and when it's not working. The smart contracts involved on the blockchain associated with that revenue token should actually automatically pay that money out to those token holders. So therefore, I think it's a clear revenue. But obviously, you'll do it in the form of two lots of tokens. So you'll have your capital raise token, which will give you an entitlement to a share of that revenue, and you'll receive that revenue in the form of a revenue share token. So that was very clear until I made that point. But obviously, you've got two layers which nobody ever likes, but I think it's actually good news.
Just to follow on from your question earlier about the IO model, and it's more about the legitimacy, right? That coercion behind the scenes. Do you think when that sort of model is legitimized and regulated, is that going to provide enough opacity and enough reporting, enough level of trust that we could create more liquid markets, especially in the UK?
Well, I hope so. I mean, I think it would be a shame if regulation caused so many problems that everything dried up.
Right. About issuing securities, which is a big deal.
Yeah, but I think you will want to have some framework where you've really got, I think, the backing of trust. But I mean, you only have to turn on the television set over the last 3-4 years, and you've probably lost all confidence in the British government. But the one thing I found when I was reading that document, that I thought, this is right. It's about re-establishing London as the most innovative financial centre in the world, and it's about funding and growth in small, at the smaller end of the market. Yeah. And I think regulation aids that process. Right. I don't think it should be seen as a bad thing.
When you mention the idea of funding businesses to stimulate growth of the economy, the idea of constant easing comes to mind. Is that what we're trying to achieve here?
No, I don't think that's what we're trying to achieve at all. What I'm trying, and I find it quite interesting, last Thursday I was around at UCL where they had a blockchain and real estate presentation by people who were involved in the Bartlett School of Architecture. And there was a lot of talk about what blockchain can achieve and a lot of talk about funding. And it just occurs to me all the time that we have got enormous amounts of money, especially in this country, that is sitting there as investable funds. When you've got high net worths, you've got PE funds, you've got venture capitalists. I mean, the amount of money is just staggering. I mean, a lot of people don't realise that there's more money managed in the UK that's not managed out of London or managed out of Edinburgh than is managed in the whole of Italy and Lugano combined. I mean, these are really big numbers. And yet at the same time, you've got people with huge need states. And sometimes they're large need states, sometimes they go down to the smaller need states, but there are an enormous number of people in the smaller need states. And it's a question of seeing if we can find some way, whether we do it automatically or just find a more cheap way of doing it. I mean, the current way of supplying capital to people with need states is quite cumbersome. I mean, you've got crowdfunding events, you've got cheese and wine parties, you've got expensive lunches, you've got people arguing themselves senseless over success fees. There's an enormous amount of cost associated with the process. Well, really what we've got to try and do is get people on this side and this side to meet in the middle and then expand their businesses and get to funding.
Disintermediation.
Yeah, but I mean, is that a route? Because we've seen this. I mean, one of the stories was told was really 25 years ago. The stockbroker who said, I don't understand that people will never want to buy shares online because they'll always want to meet with me. Well, that person's been well and truly disintermediated.
That's why I brought up the point though. It's like, you've got all this money, it is sitting there, you put that right, you've got all these people that need that money, but we're kidding ourselves if we think that, we're so young, still very early to say it's just completely trustworthy to throw these huge amounts in. And I think, my personal opinion, the biggest issue in front of us is the trust and risk. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what this industry needs to do to grow up, to obtain that trust. And there's lots of stuff going on in the background that is completely negating any trust that's been.
Yeah, but I'm excited to hear you say that, because that's precisely what we want to do at Blockchain Analytica. We want to be involved in that process of creating that trust by, I would say, when you give a whole lot of money to your idiot son-in-law who's got a great business idea, and you never see the money again because every great business idea that idiot son-in-law, daughter-in-law has fails spectacularly. It's because they've never done the research. That's what we do. As I say, when we write our research reports, it's companies, we've never had industry, stuff we've never had anything to do with before. First thing we do is establish proof of concept. Then we look at total addressable market, is it growing? Then we have a proper look under the hood of the business, If you say you're creating a whole load of, energy drinks, we actually want to know that the drinks exist. We want to check them out in Ocado. We want actually to go and look at your contracts, Then we want to spend a lot of time with the management and say, are these credible guys that we can really get behind and back? And then we want to have some detailed understanding of the financials. And I think that is part of a due research process.
I think there have to be different types of companies coming through. So I think that it's important to have a proof of concept. For some companies, but there should also be room for just people being creative. If the people haven't been creative, we wouldn't have like YouTube, it wouldn't be WhatsApp, and these companies didn't have a proof of concept before they started.
Well, yeah,
they did it because they were cool, and it should be, and that's the way it should be. So we have to have like both parts. So, and then, maybe later you can come in on a later stage.
No, I buy in always. I always tell my kids that the golden rule in life is to be interesting. As I say that Walt Disney made far more money than any consulting actuary. So you want to get into that space of being interesting and being credible. I think that's absolutely right. But we can still have proof of concept. I'm just going to go to the back. There was something at the back now.
Yeah, I wanted to go back on the IEO for a minute. I feel like, like we said earlier, IEOs are ICOs in the new packaging, and they don't really solve the main issues with ICOs, which, if you look at it from a core perspective, are a massive concentration of the tokens and a complete lack of accountability over the long run. And finally, ICO being a skill by itself. So you can be good at raising money, but it doesn't tell me anything whether you'll be able to deliver or not. And I think with IEOs, we have the same problem where, you need a good relationship with those exchanges, and you need to be able to sell the dream, but it doesn't tell me anything about will you be able to build your dream. And we have a big spread here where, we're just judging people on their ability to communicate on the sale, but we're not having any information on their ability to actually build something that will stand the test of time.
Yeah, I think that's right. The sad thing is that most of us have never met a con man that we didn't like. But I think it's very important when we're talking here about the exchanges. It's not to blind everything with too much labelling. It's to say, well, this is an investment idea that somebody's come up with. This is a concept. Do I want to back that or not? Some people don't mind backing failures because they think, well, they're so diversified that they can cope with a few failures because they know they're going to pick up successes elsewhere. We are still at a relatively early stage in terms of talking about securitized tokens and there's being associated with exchanges. And those tokens will have meaningful differences. And the problem, I think, really with the whole ICO initially was that what you were buying didn't really give you any right. The thing with a revenue token is that gives you a right. That thing is absolutely set on the block that you will get a portion of that company's revenue. So therefore, you don't even have to make many judgments in terms of its profitability. You will simply get, a pre-judged, a pre-arranged, preset portion.
The company can be good at selling. I would get right, but if the revenue is zero, I still get zero. You see what I mean? They might be very good showman. They might go on a world road tour to sell their IEOs, and they would sell the token. But then the company doesn't generate any profit, and we're back to square one.
Well, this is always a problem with any form of securitized investment, which is why you have certain so-called good concepts like diversification and then research and due diligence. This is why part of the reason we want to establish Blockchain Analytica in the research space, because we want to be quite actively challenging people and saying, well, if you're going to come up with this, you're going to say this, well, then we want to know that you're going to deliver. So therefore, I've had a relatively early stage company that's wants to provide blockchain services into one particular consumer industry. They've got that's their side of the business, and I was with the exchange this afternoon. We just have to try and find a way to marry the exchanges, what the exchange wants to do and what this company wants to do. But again, I think, for exchange to develop that trust, and this is where the exchange becoming more like an investment bank can be very positive, because if an exchange besmirches itself with a bad reputation for pushing bad deals, it becomes a chop shop. Whereas if an exchange gets a reputation for generating good deals, then it becomes more like a bulge bracket. So there will be, there's inevitably going to be an element of reputation. I mean, there is inevitably going to be risk, and there will inevitably be failures. But that's not very different from the fiat world, which we've been well and truly used to for a very long time.
And many IPOs are just bigger scale pumps and dumps that cost a lot more to run.
And listed companies as well. I mean, so none of these investments, none of them is without risk.
They're all speculation.
But but at the same time, if you average everything out, you will find that you do participate. You participate in the growth of the world economy plus.
You mentioned earlier that you had spoken to Chris Belinsky and Jack Tartar, and Chris Belinsky's got a really good token valuation model. What are the key tenets that you would look for in a blockchain company or a token valuation?
Well, I think I would say to people about blockchain is that if you want to be a Rails bookmaker at the races, you need a big leather satchel. But just because you own a big leather satchel doesn't make you a Rails bookmaker. So, we've got those companies that have, are the SaaS providers into blockchain, and that's, again, are in the blockchain space. And then we've got, the actual crypto assets themselves. I mean, pure crypto, pure digital assets, I mean, I would not really be able to evaluate much more than simply to say this one's a matter of fear or greed. There are going to be so many exogenous variables out there. So, I mean, if the rest of the world's going swimmingly, you might find that people just walk away from Bitcoin because they say, well, it's actually not generating a dividend. I don't have to go into something that just simply is there for its neutrality or its trustworthiness. And basically, it proxies gold. And I've never been able to value gold. But what I do when you've got an asset which is actually generating a revenue stream, then it becomes easier to evaluate because you actually don't have the predictability on the revenue stream. You have your own risk required return that you're going to get off that revenue stream for the value you pay for it, form a yield. And then it becomes like valuing any other asset, just using some sort of preferred yield or return.
Do you think we're actually at that stage where out of the 2,000 plus token projects that are out there, how many of them are actually generating a revenue stream?
For the holders?
Well, for anyone really, aside from the speculative.
Well, any instrument that is zero coupon is literally only going to trade on the basis of fear and greed. Any instrument that has an income attached to it is going to be more easier to value using some sort of technical measures. I mean, even then you can get things very, very badly wrong, but you can at least say, just as you're talking about an apartment or whether it's a revenue share token, if you've got, you value an apartment on the basis of the rental yield and what you need. You value a revenue share token can be valued on exactly the same basis. You say, I don't believe this company is going to run out of revenue. I bought a token that gives me a share of that revenue. Therefore, I can say, I want this amount, I'll take, I want this amount of return because I think it's risky. And then you'll come up with a number. And that's always going to be the case. Somebody says, when somebody actually asks you the nuts and bolts question, say, well, we want to put some money into this thing. What do you think the underlying asset's at? What do you think it's worth? Or where do you think it could go to?
And just on that note, would the investors be given like a rough number of the probability of default of this particular company you're about to invest in, or will they have to come up with their own numbers and analyze the company on their own?
Well, I think we'd hope that we can do most of the due research process for them, but if we're being paid by a company to write about them, clearly we're going to be putting them in a favourable light, or without writing anything that's untrue. But similarly, I mean, I find investors are rather amusing because they say, well, if you're writing sponsored research, you're biased because you're being paid for by the company. And I say, yeah, but you're willing to spend an hour with the CEO. I think the CEO's probably been paid for by the company. So I think, you know, at the end of the day, you have to be able to make that level of evaluation. You know, when Sir Alex Ferguson goes on TV after a game Man United have lost and said, well, you know, actually the referee was making more refereeing errors than I've ever known in my life. Well, you take that with a bit of a pinch of salt. And I think sometimes you have to make an evaluation yourself about something. And I think that's the case. But we would always hope to have, you know, a robust proof of concept, a robust assessment of the total addressable market growth, a decent look under the hood, actually proof of existence of the company, you know, really getting to grips with, you know, senior management who's driving the process, and then what the valuation is.
Would they be able to, let's say, if they wanted to, and they actually wanted to invest in large quantity, would they be able to bring, let's say, a third party to do, let's say, an audit of the firm just to make sure everything is up to scratch?
You'd hope so, and I think that's always good. Not least because if the raising company then runs for the hills, then you've saved yourself a bit of bother. But that's, I mean, you know, these are all parts of that process, and clearly investors themselves will be, they'll be wanting to do their own work. But as I say, what we're there to do is to facilitate that process. So when somebody says, has anybody done the work on this particular idea? Somebody can say, yeah, we have. Yeah, well, you know, they may have just copied and pasted all of our product and they've made it a little bit more like they've done it from a bit of scratch cooking themselves. But you know, I think on the whole they don't.
That seems like a good place to wrap things up. Everyone, thank you.